Today we're looking at factoring trinomials in the form of ax squared plus bx plus c, and these are going to be ones specifically with a GCF or greatest common factor. Sometimes trinomials in the form of ax squared plus bx plus c have a GCF or greatest common factor that can be factored out before we begin the process of factoring by grouping. This will make each number smaller and easier to manage. If you would like to have some steps, they are written out here, but we will be going over them for each example. So the very first thing whenever you're factoring is you want to see if the trinomials have a GCF or greatest common factor. And how you do that is you look at each number, 2, 6, and 4, and you want to think to yourself, are there any numbers that will evenly divide into 2, 6, and 4? Well, the very first thing you want to look for is even numbers. All even numbers are divisible by 2, and so all of these are even, so I can pull a 2 out of all of them. We're going to evenly divide a 2 to each piece. 2 divided by 2 is a 1, so that this is 1x squared, but we can just write x squared. There's kind of like an invisible 1 in front of that x squared. 6 divided by 2 is a 3x. 4 divided by 2 is a 2. So next we want to factor this piece. Now, if there's not a 1 or a number here, it's like a 1, and then we can go right to the shortcut. So we have a 2, we have 2 parentheses. The first thing in each piece is going to be an x, whatever the variable is. First we learn to add, then we learn to multiply. We're going to look for two things that multiply to 2 and add to 3. The only two things that multiply to 2 are 1 times 2. And luckily, 1 times 2 is 2, and 1 plus 2 is 3. So a plus 1 and a plus 2 are going to be the numbers that we're going to put in this factored form here. Okay, number 2, we want to look and find the greatest common factor. Now, I am noticing that the first and last are even. 2 is not the greatest common factor for this trinomial. But what I can do is I can look for a 3. And there is a special property of all numbers that are divisible by 3. If you add up the digits, and that number is divisible by 3, the whole number is. So 1 plus 8 is 9. 9 is divisible by 3. So 18 is divisible by 3. 3 plus 3 is 6. 6 is divisible by 3, so 33 is divisible by 3. And 1 plus 2 is 3. And so 3 is divisible by 3. So all three of these numbers have a 3 that we can pull off out of the way. So we're going to divide each piece by 3. 18 divided by 3 is 6x squared. 33 divided by 3 is minus 11x, and 12 divided by 3 is a plus 4. Now, when we have a greatest common factor, we want to make sure it's part of the answer. So I'm just going to do an arrow, and I'm going to put the 3 down here, but I'm not going to look at it again until the end. So I only want to look at this piece. Now, I have a number in front of my x squared. So I'm going to multiply it. 6 times 4 is 24. I'm looking for two things that multiply to 24 and add to negative 11. So let's go ahead and write the factors of 24. 1 and 24, 2 and 12, 3 and 8, 4 and 6. And both of these are going to either be positive or they could both be negative. Now, since what I'm trying to add together is a negative number, both numbers are going to be negative. Now, negative 8 minus 3 gives us the negative 11. So we write our first term. We split apart, we uncombine the like terms to be minus 3x and minus 8x. Those combine to be negative 11x, so we haven't changed anything. Add in our lightning bolt. The first two have a 3 and an x in common that we can pull out. And then whatever sign you have, you're going to bring that down. Now 8 and 4, they have a 4 that we can pull out. You know you did it right if these two are the same. So our first factor is going to be 3x minus 4. And our second one is 2x minus 1. And that would be our answer for number 2. Now, number 3 is a tricky one. If you have a negative in front of the x squared, you have to pull it out. It doesn't work well to factor if you have a negative number in front of the leading term. So we are going to pull a negative out. And when you pull a negative out, what happens is all of the signs change. So the x squared becomes positive, the positive 11x becomes a negative 11x, and the minus 10 becomes a plus 10. We're going to keep the negative as part of our answer. But since there's not a number in the front of the x squared, we can just have the easy factoring where we have an x and an x. First we learn to add, then we learn to multiply. We're looking for two things that multiply to 10 and add to negative 11. So 1 times 10 adds to an 11, but we're looking for a negative 11. Now since this is a positive 10, they either both have to be positive or they could both be negative. And if I take a negative 1 and a negative 10, that's going to equal the negative 11 I'm looking for. So I have a minus 1 and a minus 10. And this is what this factors out to. Make sure when you write your answer, there is a negative in the front. Now, on number 4, the leading term is negative. So again, when we are factoring out the greatest common factor, we want to make sure we bring out a negative. Now, all 5, 30, and 200 all end in either a 5 or a 0. So if you notice all of your terms have a 5 or a 0 in the last place, they will all be divisible by 5. So we are going to factor a 5 out. Notice that all pieces have an x in them. So we are also going to pull an x out of our factor. So if I divide negative 5x cubed by a negative 5x, the negative 5's cancel and one of the x's cancel, so I'm going to be left with an x squared. On the second term, I have a negative 30. If I take negative 30 and divide it by negative 5, I get a positive 6. I'm also dividing out one of the x's, so I'm going to have a positive 6x as my second term. And if I take 200x and divide it by a negative 5x, the x's cancel. 200 divided by 5 is 40. And I want to make sure it's negative because a negative times a negative will equal a positive. Now, once I've taken out the greatest common factor, I'm going to factor this. So I want to make sure that I have my negative 5x. I want to make sure it's in the answer. A lot of people will leave that off. Just make sure you write it, and then you're going to have your two factors. There's not a number here, so this is an easy sort of factoring. You just take your two x's. First we learn to add, then we learn to multiply. We're looking for two things that multiply to negative 40 and add to 6. So since this is a negative 40, one of the numbers are going to be negative and one are going to be positive. And since it's a positive 6, we're looking for the bigger number to be positive, the smaller number to be negative. So I've got 1 and 40, negative 2 and 20. 3 doesn't go into 40, but 4 does, negative 4 and 10. And if I add 10 minus 4, I'm going to get my 6. So those are going to be the two numbers we are looking for. Number 5, all of them are even again, so we're going to divide a 2 out of all the pieces. We get x squared minus 7x minus 18. This is a easy blue one. So we have an x and an x. First we learn to add, then we learn to multiply. We're looking for two things that multiply to negative 18. and add to negative 7. Since they are, since it's a negative number, we have one negative, one positive, and then we're adding to be a negative 7. So the bigger number has to be negative, the smaller number is positive. And look here, we've got 2 minus 9 is the negative 7. So we have a plus 2 minus 9. Make sure you don't leave off that 2, so that's important. So make sure you have that 2 and bring it down. Number 36, or sorry, number 6, all of these numbers are divisible by 3. If I add 3 plus 6, I get 9. 9 is divided by 3. 1 plus 2 is 3. 3 is divided by 3, divisible. And so we're going to pull a 3 out. Also, all of the pieces have an x, so we're going to pull an x out of the number 6 first. So 3 and an x. We have an x squared minus 4x, and 36 divided by 3 is a minus 12, and the x has been pulled out. Make sure you bring the 3x down. There's not a number in front of the x, so this we're going to go right to our parentheses. We're going to have x and x. First we learn to add, then we learn to multiply. We're looking for two things that multiply to negative 12. Add to negative 4, we've got 1 and 12, 2 and 6, 3 and 4. Since this is a negative number, we're going to have one negative, one positive to multiply to be a negative 12. But when we add them, we have a negative 4. So we know the bigger number has to be a negative, the smaller number has to be a positive, and negative 6 plus 2 equals our negative 4. So if I have negative 6, positive 2, that would be our factors. Okay, looking at number 7. Now I'm looking here, I'm noticing all of these are even, so I know at least a 2 comes out. But since these are kind of bigger, I'm wondering also if I could do a 4 or maybe even an 8. So 4 will go into 32, 88, and 20. 8 will not go into 20. So I'm thinking that we're going to start by pulling a 4 out. If you pull it out and you notice they're all still even, then maybe try it again. So I have divide by 4, I get 5x squared minus 22x plus 8 times 4 is 32. Now I'm going to need some room, but the 4 is going to come down to the bottom. I have a number in front of the x squared, and so I am going to, I can't do the shortcut. I have to multiply 5 and 8 to get 40. I'm looking for two things that multiply to 40, add to negative 22. So 1 and 40, 2 and 20. And I'm noticing as I'm doing this, 20 plus 2 is 22. Now I'm looking for a negative 22, so they both have to be the same sign. A negative 2 times a negative 20 is a positive 40, and a negative 2 and a negative 20 equal a negative 22. So this is where we have to do our lightning bolt. 5x squared minus 2x minus 20x plus 8 with our lightning bolt. Now 5 and 2 don't have anything in common. They're both prime numbers, but they both have an x that I can pull out. 5x minus 2. Whatever sign you have, bring that down. Now I'm looking for 20 and 8. What's the biggest number that will go into both 20 and 8? That will be 4. And you're going to have 5x. A negative times a negative equals positive minus 2. You know you did it right if these two are the same, or you have a pretty good idea that you did it right. Our first factor is going to be the x minus 4. Our second one is going to be whatever is in both of these second parentheses, which is the 5x minus 2. So this would be our factors for number 7. Number 8. Now, if there's not a number, it's a 1. And so I know that no numbers can come out of this because a 1 is prime, and that'll come out of everything. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to do 6 times negative 12 is negative 72. I'm looking for two things that multiply to negative 72, add to a positive 1. So 1 and 72, 2 and 36, 3 and 24, 4 and 18. 5 will not go in because it doesn't end in a 0 or a 5. 6 times 12. 7 doesn't go in. 8. 8 times 9 is 72. Now those numbers are one number apart, so I'm pretty sure those are going to be my two numbers. We have a negative 72, so we have one negative, one positive. The number we're trying to add together is a positive 1. So the bigger number has to be negative, the smaller number has to be positive. So we're going to use these two numbers here. We have our 6x squared, our minus 8x, our plus 9x, and our minus 12. We add in our lightning bolt. Now the first two are even, so I know a 2 will come out of both of those, and they both have an x. Divide the 2x out of each piece, and we're going to get 3x minus 4. Whatever sign you have, bring that down. 9 and 12 are both divisible by 3, so we're going to bring a 3 out. 9 divided by 3 is 3x, and negative 12 divided by 3 gives us the minus 4. Now these two are the same, so we have 2x plus 3, and our second parenthesis is 3x minus 4. Now we didn't take anything out, so nothing is in the front, so this is just going to be our answer. On number 9, notice there is a negative in the front. We never want a negative in the front of our of the leading coefficient. So we're going to pull the negative out. I'm also noticing that all 6, 3, and 9 have a common divisor of 3, common factor of 3. So we're going to pull the 3 out. And then they all have an x. So we're going to pull an x out as well. We're looking for what do they all have in common. So negative 3 times 2 is negative 6, and then they have an x squared. Negative 3 times a 1 is a negative 3, but I also need an x, so I'm going to have a plus x. And then a negative 3 times a negative 3 gives me the positive 9, and then we also pulled the x out. Now, we want to make sure that we keep that negative 3x in our answer, but we're going to just ignore it until we factor this piece in here. We're going to take our 2 times negative 3. That gives us negative 6. We're looking for two things that multiply to negative 6. Add to a positive 1. So we have 1 and 6, or 2 and 3. Now 2 and 3 are one number apart, so I'm pretty sure it's going to be those two. One of them is going to be negative, one is going to be positive. I'm trying to add to a positive 1. So the bigger number is positive, the smaller number is negative. We're going to take our 2x squared. We're going to have a minus 2x, a plus 3x, and a minus 3. And we put in our lightning bolt. Both the first two factors have a 2 and an x. We divide those out, and then we have an x minus 1. Whatever sign you have, you're going to bring it down. Now 3, they both have a 3, so let's pull that out, and then we have an x minus 1. Our factors are going to be 2x plus 3, and our second one is going to be the x minus 1. Number 10. Now I'm looking at 4 and 10. 4 and 10 both have 2's in common, but 13 does not have a 2. So there is not a number that can come out of all of these. However, since this is negative, we have to take out the negative. And what that negative does is it changes all the signs to positives. So we're going to multiply 4 times 10 to get 40. We're looking for two numbers that multiply to 40, add to 13. We've got 1 and 40, 2 and 20. 3 doesn't go into 40, but 4 and 10, 5 and 8. 8 plus 5 is 13, so those are going to be the two numbers I'm looking for. Make sure you bring the negative to the bottom. We're going to take 4x squared. We're going to uncombine the like terms to be 5x plus 8x plus 10. Add in your lightning bolt. Now 4x squared plus 5x, we're going to pull an x out of both of those. Whatever sign you have, you're going to bring it down. Now 8 and 10 are both even, so they're divisible by 2. 2 times 4 is the 8x. 4x is 8x. 2 times 5 is 10. We're going to write our final factors of x plus 2 and 4x minus 5, or plus 5. Okay, now the last three, we're going to go ahead, we're going to take it one step further, and we are going to solve the equations. So looking at number 11, the very first part, we're not going to worry about this equals 0. We're going to factor it, and then we're going to set each piece equal to 0. Now, all of these end in either a 5 or a 0, so we're going to factor out a 5. We're going to pull the 5 out. We have x squared minus 2x minus 15. Okay, so there is not a number in the front, so this is going to be the simple ones. We're going to have our 5 here. Make sure you bring the 5 down. We have an x and an x. First we learn to add, then we learn to multiply. We're looking for two things that multiply to negative 15, add to a negative 2. We've got 1 and 15, or 3 and 5. We're looking at the number we're trying to add to is a negative 2. So we know the bigger number has to be negative. So we have a positive 3 and a negative 5. This is all equaling 0. And so we're going to set each piece equal to 0. Now 5 will never equal 0, so we don't need to worry about that. X plus 3 equals 0, and x minus 5 equals 0. Minus 3 to both sides, our x equals a negative 3. Add 5 to both sides, x equals 5. Now number 12, I'm looking and I'm seeing an x in each piece. So that is what I'm going to pull out. I'm going to divide an x out. I have x squared minus 5x minus 14. First we learn to add, then we learn to multiply. We're looking for two things that multiply to negative 14. And that would be 1 and 14, or 2 and 7. I'm trying to add them to equal a negative 5. So I know the bigger number is going to be negative, the smaller number is positive, because they have to be different signs since this is a negative number. I have an x plus 2, and an x minus 7. These are going to all be set equal to 0, x equals 0, x plus 2 equals 0, x minus 7 equals 0. So we have x equals 0, minus 2 from both sides, x equals a negative 2. Add 7 to both sides, x equals 7. First thing that we want to do is we want to see if there's a number that will evenly divide into 6, 14, and 12. Now they're all even, so we know a 2 will divide into all of them. So let's divide a 2 out of each piece. This gives us 3x squared minus 7x minus 6. Now we're going to take we have a number in the front, so we're going to multiply 3 and negative 6 together to give us negative 18. We're looking for two things that multiply to negative 18 and add to negative 7. That would be 1 and 18, 2 and 9, or 3 and 6. Now since we have a negative 18, we know that one one number is negative and one is positive. If we're trying to add to -7, the bigger number has to be negative and the smaller number has to be positive. So 2 minus 9 is our -7. Now we want to make sure we bring the 2 down. We have 3x squared plus 2x minus 9x minus 6. And then the first two have an x in common. We have 3x plus 2. Whatever sign we have here, we bring it down. Now 3 will divide evenly into both 9 and 6. 3 times 3 is 9, and -3 times a positive 2 will give us -6. Our factors are we're going to have 2x minus 3 and 3x plus 2, and that all equals 0. Now we're going to set each piece equal to 0. 2 is not ever equal to 0, so we can just ignore that. We have x minus 3 equals 0, and 3x plus 2 equals 0. If I add 3 to both sides, I know that x equals 3 minus 2 from both sides. 3x equals -2, divide by 3, and x equals -2/3. So our two answers are going to be -2/3 and 3.